Okay, so we are looking at day 6 today. We're going to be covering 2 chapters. That's chapters 7 and 8 of your youth fitness manual. However, that's going to correspond with chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12 in your regular textbook. So that actually, it's a lot in the regular book, but it does, don't feel like it's that overwhelming. This is it all kind of goes together quite well. So starting off, we're looking at the core and balance training side of things. We are moving out of, if we open sort of a traditional OPT template here, that should be, there it is. Until now, we've talked about the warm-up section where we covered a little bit of the flexibility stuff. Yesterday, we covered cardio. Well, now we're moving into, it's supposed to be blank. Now we're moving into the core balance reactive section. And then we are also going to cover SAQ today, or speed, agility, and quickness. So we are sort of getting into the workout, although we're not quite into the workout yet, right? We're still very much kind of easing ourselves in. We don't want our client to, start lifting heavy weights until, we know that their body is, actually prepped and ready to go, which is why we sometimes refer to the core balance reactive section. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as movement prep or movement preparation. And you'll sometimes see that term in your textbooks. It's not really a super official term or anything like that, but it is where we're going to cover, want to get the core turned on before we go work out. We want to get the balance, so the foot is turned on, and the core is even further turned on with the balance. And then reactive stuff, also core, but we're also kind of turning our nervous system on, because reactive is all about, literally reacting to things in real time. So then we also have the speed, agility, and quickness section, which is where, we are really kind of starting to get into the sort of athletic side of things, where it's like, we're going to run some sprints. Sometimes speed, agility, and quickness will be your entire workout. Sometimes you'll have OPT templates that consist of this stuff. You don't do resistance training that day because it's just not part of the day. And then we get into the cool down, but that is sort of where we are headed today. So just to sort of introduce things, we know that, when we're talking about like training the core, a lot of people think that that means training the abs, right? And that's not necessarily, the only thing that your core is, right? Like your core is anything that's attached to your lumbopelvic hip complex, right? It's the whole thing, not just your abs, not just the six pack. Like, we see a lot of people in the gym, just doing hundreds of thousands of crunches, trying to carve out their middles, because that's, what they want to see. But really, they need to make sure they have like an actual strong core. And in order to do that, you need to make sure that you're addressing everything. Your core is made up of several different muscles. Some of them stabilize your spine and hold it in place. Some of it does move your spine around, and some of it just simply attaches, like, even like the parts of your thighs that are attached to your pelvis are part of your core. So when people train the core improperly, they end up with low back problems, which can, often sort of translate into their later years, especially like, as they start to become like adults and seniors and things like that. And this is why like core training is especially important for like our youth clients, right? If we set them up for success now, they're going to be strong for the rest of their life, which again is sort of our main focus, right? Like it's really, when it comes to like training kids, it's not really about making the world's most athletic 10-year-old, like that, maybe that's their goal. They could be like, they want to be like an Olympic level athlete. Thomas, did you ever watch Guts when you were a kid, or Global Guts?
Yes, I absolutely love Guts.
Right? Wasn't that show incredible?
Well, it was, yeah.
Dude, when I was a kid, I used to watch that show, and it was when like my parents would be working and they'd drop me off at my grandma's. My grandma would babysit me, and she had this little family room in the back. And I used to tear that room apart, and I would make like a little obstacle course. And like jump around and like do all these things while watching like Global Guts. She had like an old exercise bike from like, you know, decades. I wonder if I can find a picture of it. Schwinn exercise bike vintage. Yeah, very, very old. Yeah, oh my God, there it is. She had this just ancient exercise bike that I have never
Wow.
seen anybody that I am related to by blood touch this. Like, least of all my grandmother, but like, yeah,
Wow.
it's crazy.
And Schwinn is a very good brand.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know, it was solid metal. So because it was so heavy, I used to do this thing. And it had this little like, you can see this little like gear on it, where you could set like a timer, but you could all, and then it told you how many miles per hour you were going. And then this is how you would increase or decrease like the resistance.
Mm.
And I would crank the resistance up. And I was a little kid, you know, a little light, weigh nothing child. And I would
Mhm.
get on one side of the bike. I would like put both feet in one pedal and I would like ride it around in a circle. And I would try to like bounce. I'd be like watching Guts, like, yeah, I could do that. You know? Oh man. Anyway. Um, so that is, you know, that as a kid, like it trained my balance, right?
Mhm.
That's what I was going for. But like you know, that's not the goal. The goal is not necessarily to make like the world's most athletic kid who's going to go on Global Guts and, you know, tear it up. The goal is to create a youth that's going to, you know, move into adulthood and have healthy habits that hopefully they're going to carry on, you know.
Right.
I'm sure that, like, you know, you're in personal training. I'm sure you have those days where like you're just like, man, I've been really inactive and I'm just antsy and I need to go do something physical. That's a good instinct, you know. Like
Mhm.
that was hopefully you know, instilled at a young age. And that's really the type of adults that we're trying to sort of, you know, inspire here. So our objectives today, we want to understand the importance of core training. Hopefully, you know, we're sold on the concept. Oh God, I'm gonna sneeze. We'll be able to determine the appropriate core and balance exercises that fit within the OPT model. I'm gonna like.
Bless you.
Thank you. God, I'm falling apart, so I can't stop yawning either. I like worked out a little early, like a half hour earlier than I normally do, and then I came back and I was like, I'm gonna lay down for 10 minutes. That'll be nice. And now I'm like,
It always sounds good in the beginning.
yeah, man, it was like a little 10-minute nap ruined me. Uh, um, and then we did be able to design a safe and effective program, right? As always. So the rationale behind things, you know, like I said, the core is not just your abs; it is the entirety of your lumbopelvic hip complex, right? And so, by definition, your lumbopelvic hip complex is any and all of the muscles that are attached to, but also that move the spine and the pelvis. That's the core, right? It is not just the abdominals, although the abdominals are part of it. This is kind of like, it reminds me, I always feel the same way when I'm talking about core training that I feel when I'm talking about like carbohydrates. Like people are like, carbs are bad for you. And I'm like, no, sugar is bad for you. Right. People are like, I did my abs. It's like, I did my core. And it's like, no, you did your abs. Like, so we're trying to be a little bit more specific about that. We're trying to make sure that we understand that like your entire lumbopelvic hip complex, all of the muscles that attach your pelvis to your spine, all the muscles that move your spine. So yes, your abdominals, and all the muscles that are stabilizing the spine. That's really what we're talking about. So obviously that's going to be really important for making sure that you have a lot of like proprioception and your body can move the way it's supposed to do. But we also need to train for our balance as well. You know, in our movement prep section, we do some balance exercises. Those balance exercises are really great because they turn, you know, the little micro muscles that you're going to use, you know, like there's plenty of times. Actually, I have a really like, this made me think of this the other day. I wasn't even balancing, I was doing a bench press, but I didn't have my feet in the same spot that I normally do. And I remember like I felt like I like off kilter just a little bit, and I was like, oh man, like I got to make sure I like set my feet because I'm, you know, this is a lot of freaking weight and I'm having trouble. um my balance was a little thrown off, and that was like laying down seated. We're talking about like, if you're going to have your client moving through full ranges of motion, doing total body exercises, going all over the place, we definitely want to make sure that our balance and our coordination, everything is nice and turned on, because that's going to activate all of the types of muscles that are going to keep you upright, and they're going to engage your posture in the way that it's supposed to, which will reduce our risk of injury. So as we start to get older, and we start to develop physically again, like, one of the reasons why core and balance training are in particular so important to our youth clients is because, again, we kind of go back to the idea of like that changing, neurological connection, right? Like your proprioception, your body's, by definition, right? Proprioception, it's your body's understanding of where it is in space. Right. So as our youth's bodies get older and like start to develop, and they're growing through like new ranges of motion, their brain's still running on the old like software that like, oh, my leg is, 1.5 feet long. And now suddenly it's 6 inches longer than that. Right. And it's like, well, now it's like learning how to control that's going to be a little bit different, so that is, that like small change. This is one of the reasons why it's so important to train for balance. Balance is the best way to develop proprioception. Out of all the types of exercising that we've got, when you are doing something in an unstable environment, that is the best way to develop proprioception. If you're trying to develop your body's understanding of where it is in space, it makes sense that when you do something that's very unstable, and you end up kind of wiggling a little bit, and you're like trying to like get things locked down and like hold yourself in space. Think about like, let's say I'm losing my balance a little bit, right? Let's say like I'm standing like this, and then like I lose my balance, right? Just a little bit. Now I'm tilted this way. Well, what has to happen? I have to contract these core muscles over here to draw me back to neutral, right? I need that to contract to draw me back up into straight. But, the amount of force that it's going to take to contract me from this position is different than the amount of force it's going to take to contract me from this position, that position, right? So if I'm balancing and I'm losing my balance, I'm wiggling around a little bit, and I'm trying to like learn how to stabilize, I'm giving my brain tons of information, it's almost like teaching it an alphabet. It's like, well, in order to get back from here to here, you needed this much force. In order to get back from here to here, you needed this much force. And in order to get back from over on this side, you needed this much force. And you need to recruit this muscle, that muscle, and this muscle, right? Like that is just information. If you're trying to teach someone how to speak a new language, you teach them a bunch of like words that eventually they start to all put together, and they develop it and get better at it slowly over time. And that's sort of how we develop proprioception. And the two best ways to do that are through core training and balance training. And then there's also a lot of reactive stuff in there as well. Make sure I got make sure I don't get ahead of my notes here. So when we define the core, right, like I said, it is going to be your entire lumbopelvic hip complex. A large portion of people really struggle with their core. Most people really tend to like struggle with strengthening their core because there's a lot of misconceptions about the most effective ways to train it. You see a lot of people doing things that make them feel it in their abdomen. And those are things like crunches and sit-ups and things like that. And it's great that they feel it in their abdomen. Like, don't get me wrong. Like that is, that's awesome. But it isn't necessarily, it isn't necessarily that they are training their core. They're training like their abdominals, which is really makes them really, really good at like moving their spine. But remember, we also need to be able to stabilize our spine. There's a really big distinct difference between the muscles that, wrench us around and the muscles that sort of hold us in place, right? And so I always describe this to my clients, if I look up like the classic example, if I look up like a Superman exercise, right? If I look up this exercise right here, I will see 10 demos that I hate. This is a really good one. I like this one. She gets an A+. I hate this guy. I think that looks very bad. Let's see here. Not a big fan of this guy either. Let's see if you guys can pick up on what I'm laying down here. This guy's killing it. This guy's doing a really good job. This guy's doing a really good job. And I'll pull up one more bad demo because I'm sure I've got options. Actually, a lot of these are pretty good. There we go. There's another bad one. All right. What do you guys see about this Superman exercise? Why do I like this one? I dislike this one. I like this one. And I dislike this one. And that one's good. And that one's bad. What do you guys see? What do you guys think the difference is? Why do I like some of them and dislike others?
The position of the arms in the arch.
Close. It is the position of something. I actually don't mind the fact that their arms are forward. It is a Superman. It's not a prone cobra. Prone cobra is the one where you do the arms back. I do actually like that exercise more, but this is still like the arms are still within like a normal good spot. Get a little bit closer to the spine. What do we notice about, maybe the upper portion of their spine? What's the difference between this lady here, this guy here? This guy here is doing a good job. This guy here, not so much. And then that guy's doing I really dislike that one. And then she's killing it. Go to the spine. What do you think we see about the spine?
The posture in which they're holding their head up.
Exactly. The Superman has nothing to do with this, right? Like, you see people do a Superman and they'll raise their head up. And it's like, that doesn't do anything for you. That actually, in fact, that trains the wrong neck muscles to do the job. And so, but I get it. I get where people come from. We think of exercise and we think of it as like as much movement as possible, because it's like, if I move as much as possible, I'm burning the most calories or I'm recruiting the most muscle, right? You see people like doing bicep curls and they'll do like, they're just trying to like, it's like, oh, not enough. And then they want to like get the gap gone entirely. And it's like, hey, like you're not designed to move that way, like you see people lock stuff out constantly. We have this perception of what exercise is, that it's all about as much movement as possible. And that's not necessarily true, especially when it comes to core training. A lot of people do a lot of crunching exercises, and twisting exercises, and leg raises and things like that. They move their spine around all day. But our foundation for core work should always begin with a lack of movement. We're actually trying to train the core to hold itself in place. And you can't do that if you're moving things around, which is why balance training and core training are so important. And it's why we start in the stabilization level. Thomas and Bet, you guys will both remember, like, last time we got together, right? We were talking about the differences between like the stabilization level, the strength level, and the power level. Stabilization is about lack of movement. It's about learning how to hold things in the right position, right? Imagine if like you had somebody who's just really strong and they could do like 50 pounds on like a lateral raise, right? But then like if you ask them just hold their shoulder in place, they have this like awkward, really weird posture because they just don't know how to like hold it in one spot. That's not stable, right? Which means when they do try to move through that range of motion, their body's not going to, be able to like move the range of motion properly because it doesn't know how to stabilize. So typically we see people have a very strong movement system, but they have really weak stabilizers. There's a lack of proper stabilization. There's a lot of movement through the spine that we're trying to avoid. And that's what causes like, that increases all the forces through like the lumbopelvic hip complex. When we look at like a stable spine versus an unstable spine, I actually don't know if this will pull up the pictures I need. When we look at sort of the differences between like, like a spine that has like really good stability, right? Like, you see somebody with like a flat back, when someone's doing a deadlift, right? When they have like that really great like deadlift setup where they're creating like just, excellent stability in the spine, nothing's moving around, right? As you can see here, she's kind of rounding this way here. She's got a nice flat sort of posture there, right? That's creating stability. So now as she moves everything else through a range of motion, her spine's not going to have to take all those forces, versus like when we see this kind of thing, I didn't even notice that at first. That's hilarious. But you know, we see this kind of thing. What's going to happen is now the legs have to recruit, the arms have to recruit, the back has to recruit. But at the same time, now the spine is dealing with all these forces as it's going through like a range of motion. And you know, the discs are literally going to grind, and you know, there's this soft material between your discs, so you could herniate them. You know. And that's how people throw their back out during like a deadlift or a barbell squat or whatever, you know. So we definitely want to focus on our core training, you know, because it's going to do a lot. It's going to have a lot of really big benefits for us. One of the most important things is that it is going to help us develop neuromuscular efficiency, right? You guys remember this term? I say this all the time, but it's the ability to recruit the right muscle at the right time for the right amount of force in the right plane of motion. So that's a lot of like, you know, individual pieces there. But if we can recruit the correct muscles to move the way that we're supposed to, we're going to have movement efficiency. That's neuromuscular efficiency. If we recruit those muscles at the right time, not a little bit too late, not a little bit too early, right? That's gonna be neuromuscular efficiency. If we can do it for the right amount of force, imagine if you're losing, you know, you see people lose their balance and they're like, ugh, 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 ugh. The reason they're doing that is because like, you know, this muscle's contracting and it's like, oh, too much. And then it's like, oh, too much still, you know, and then they're going back and forth until eventually they kind of dial it in. You know, it's like making sauces. I don't know if either of you are like, you know, much for cooking, but it's like when you're trying to make blend ingredients together to make a sauce, you're like, too much of this. And then you put something else in there to kind of balance that out. And you're like, oh, now there's too much of that, you know, you gotta, until eventually you end up with this giant bowl. That's kind of like, you know, neuromuscular efficiency kind of happening, right? It's like if you're doing too much of one thing, you know, recruiting a muscle for the wrong amount of force, either too little or too much, you're not going to have balance. And if you're recruiting a muscle in the wrong plane of motion, you know, a lot of muscles recruit through multiple planes of motion. You know, think about your biceps, right? They're in charge of the sagittal plane with this, but they're also in charge of the transverse plane when they do that. So there's a lot of like, you know, teaching our body how it's supposed to move. That's going to develop our neuromuscular efficiency. So that's going to help us develop stability, and that's going to give us functional strength. Functional strength is, you know, us being nice and strong and be able to move the way we're supposed to. So any questions on the concepts there? By the way, what's up, Bay? I didn't say hi when you came in. Any questions so far?
So far, so good.
Cool. All right, well, let's take a look at our levels here. Let's get into the program design part of it. So again, we've got our OPT model here. And that's going to consist of, you know, 5 phases and 3 levels. And again, when it comes to things today, we're really just paying attention to the levels, you know, like we're really just going to be looking at level stuff so far. We don't have to get into the phases just yet, because like there's no such thing as like a hypertrophy core exercise. It's just core strength exercises. There's no difference between a client who's in max strength and a client who's strength endurance. Both of them are going to get the same sort of numbers, the same exercise selection, all that stuff. So we're really just going to spend our time in the levels today, which I got a little chart to kind of pull that up because I find that it's kind of helpful to see it in a slightly different way. Where the heck do I keep it though? There it is. So here is our core training, right? When we talk about core training, it is going to be where you are either going to do with stabilization clients, core stabilization exercises. With strength level clients, you're going to do core strength exercises. And with power level clients, you're going to do core power exercises. Now, when I say that, you could just open up those, you know, you could just get into your book and flip to the pages that have all those exercises listed. You know, like you could just open up your exercise checklist. You know, if I had a power level client, for instance, and be like, all right, well, here's my power level exercise checklist. And it's like, here's all the exercise. And I could just memorize all these, you know, I could do that. Memorizing is fine. You guys know that, like, obviously memorizing is a skill that we do need to develop, because we, you know, there's some definitions of things. When people ask me what muscle does what, I need to reach into my memory, right? But again, like what we want to pay attention to, which is going to help you a little bit more, is paying attention to the defining characteristics, right? It's like the analogy that I always use, and I know it's a weird one, but the analogy I always use is like bird watching. I always tell people, like, I actually don't know anything about bird watching, but I do know that there is a difference between the blue jays that are from the part of the country that I'm from versus the ones that are down here. And so you'll see down here what are called scrub jays. They're birds that look like this. They're kind of a normal sort of looking jaybird there. And then we have blue jays, which look like this. Not the Toronto Blue Jays, but the actual bird. They got a little like crown on them, right? And that's a slight difference. So if you were like, a Boy Scout filling out your bird watching manual or whatever, you guys tell I lasted in the Boy Scouts only like a couple years. If you look at the difference, you would need to know the defining characteristic between these two things, right? It's like, well, this guy's got like a little mohawk and this guy's a little bit more gray, like there's a difference there, right? That same thing is true of like the defining characteristics. And if you have those defining characteristics memorized, you will be able to recognize any of the variations. And if you see like a really cool exercise that's not in your textbook, of which there are hundreds of thousands, your book is very limited in terms of how many exercises it gives us. You need to be able to like determine where that exercise is going to go. You see something cool on Instagram, you want to incorporate it into your clients' workouts, you're going to need to know where that fits. And that's why we like our defining characteristics. So when it comes to program design, if we have a client who's in the stabilization level, so that'd be phase one, right? In terms of exercise selection, because they are a stabilization level client and because we are doing core training, we are going to choose core stabilization exercise. Now, again, you can memorize the entire list and that can work, but instead, know the defining characteristic. What makes the difference between a leopard and a tiger? Leopards have spots, tigers have stripes, right? Well, core stabilization exercises are core exercises, anything for the core, that involves little to no movement of the spine. Now, you can have some movement, obviously, like, to get up into a position. Like she's doing a Superman here, and they did a good job of making sure that she's keeping her head down. She's kind of got it up a little bit, but it's not bad. Her eyes are still down, which I will take. But, you can see when she's doing this, right? She's not really moving her spine that much. She's kind of moving it into a range of motion, and then she's probably going to hold. My favorite example of the world's greatest core stabilization routine is called the McGill Big Three. There's this physical therapist who's kind of famous. His name is Dr. Stuart McGill, and that's him right there. This older dude, but he is sort of the king of core training. When it comes down to it. And he determined that you really only need these specific 3 exercises to have like a nice, strong core. And you'll notice like you've got 3 different versions here. You have the bird dog, which involves like moving into this range of motion and then holding your spine in place. So it's all about stabilization. The side plank, she's doing a modified side plank. You could very much do this on your toes as well to make it harder. And that's, again, focusing on not moving the spine. And then he calls it a McGill sit-up or a McGill crunch, where, you sort of like lifts himself up and he's resisting forces that are trying to like drive him back down, right? He's resisting gravity as it's pulling this way. So it's sort of like an upside down plank, if you think about it that way. So that's the McGill Big Three. And then sometimes you'll see people they'll do it this way with like that's sort of an advanced McGill setup. So that is the McGill Big Three. And all of those are all about not moving the spine, even though it is core work. Now, it won't necessarily feel like the same amount of burning, but if you think about like, the 3 directions of your spine, right? I've got forces pulling this way, I've got forces pulling this way, and I've got forces pulling to either side. So if I take myself into a side plank, I'm learning how to stabilize this way, right? If I take myself into the McGill crunch, I'm learning how to stabilize this way. And if I take myself into a bird dog, I'm learning how to stabilize this way, right? And so I'm learning how to hold my spine in place every single exercise. And that's what we're going for. That's why those are core stabilization exercises. And some variation of those are in your text. All three of those are in your textbook. So the idea behind core stabilization exercises is that they're going to improve your neuromuscular efficiency. Again, we're learning how to recruit the right muscles at the right time. And it's going to develop your intervertebral stability. It's going to stabilize all the muscles in between your vertebrae. If you look at like how your spine is actually shaped, look at all of these little tiny, we don't really, look at this microanatomy all the time, but like there's so many little itty bitty muscles between each of your discs, your multifidus and your transverse abdominuses, all of those muscles that are local and as close to your center as possible. Those are the muscles that we're going to work with core stabilization exercises. And once you know how to do that, once you know how to not move, it's going to be a lot easier when you start moving your spine through a full range of motion without like damaging anything. And that's why we build our foundation in stabilization by choosing core exercises that really don't move the spine. That way, when we move into our next phase of training, our next level of training, we can start doing core strength exercises, which, these are all the classic core exercises that most of our clients are generally thinking of. So these are core exercises that do involve a full concentric and eccentric range of motion of the spine, right? This is where, it's like, okay, let's start doing some actual crunches. Let's move the spine through a full range of motion. So, if our client's in phase 2, 3, or 4, they're going to be in the strength level, right? So we are choosing core strength exercises, which are core exercises that involve a full concentric, so shortening, and eccentric, lengthening of the spine, right? We are moving all of those muscles in the spine around. So these exercises are really great because they increase our ability to recruit the core musculature through its complete range of motion. Before we really were kind of limiting our range of motion. We were kind of like, keeping it in one specific spot. Now we're kind of teaching, it's like, all right, well, now we know how to recruit here, through the full range as we kind of go back and forth. So if we think about like the different, my favorite examples of like, core stabilization exercises, we're thinking of things like the planks, the floor prone cobra, the McGill sit-up, the side plank, the bird dog, right? All those movements that don't move your spine. But now in the strength level, we're looking at the stability ball crunch, back extensions, Russian twists, wood chops, all the types of core exercises that do actually move us through a full range of motion. We look at a reverse crunch, for instance, right? That's a great exercise that does move through like a full range of motion, right? You are driving your spine, and curling it a little bit, right? And that's going to strengthen your abdominals. At least it's going to strengthen your outer abdominals. So again, we're going to go back to the anatomy of our core. We've got two different layers, right? We've got the inner layer that's holding our spine in place, and we've got the outer layer that's moving our spine around. So core stabilization exercises strengthen that inner layer to hold our spine in place. Core strength exercises strengthen the outer layer that sort of moves us through a full range of motion. And that's why we went from not moving to fully moving. Now, I will say this, guys. One thing that you're going to see is on this list, an example core strength exercise is the stability ball crunch. And a lot of people will think that the stability ball crunch belongs in the stabilization level because stability ball chest presses belong in the stabilization level. Stability ball seated shoulder presses belong in the stabilization level. Stability ball rows. Anytime you use a stability ball, you're probably in the stabilization level when it comes to other body parts. But in this example, it isn't about the piece of equipment you're using. It isn't about the fact that it's a stability ball. It is about what's happening to the spine. The question you need to ask yourself, if you're trying to determine if something is core stabilization, core strength, or core power, is what is going on with the spine, not what does what equipment am I using? So the stability ball crunch is a strength level movement because it moves the spine. They love that question. I've seen that in so many homeworks, and I had one student come back because I used to always make people at least come back one more time to like, brag to the class that they had passed their test. I was really dramatic about it too. I used to always tell people, I'm like, I want you to interrupt me. I wanted to be as disruptive as possible because it's a party. But we used to I had people come back, and one person came back and they were like, the stability ball crunch was one of my questions. And I was like, oh, look at that. They were like, which of the following, I think the question was something like, which level would the stability ball crunch be most appropriate for a client trying to develop core strength? Or something like that. They had worded it some way like that. And, stabilization was an option, and he didn't fall for it. So, all right, and then lastly, we look at our final sort of characteristic, the sort of peak of everything here. We're going to look at the core power side of things, right? So if we're in the power level, if we've got a client in, level 3, phase 5, whatever you want to call it, in terms of exercise selection, well, they're going to choose core power exercises, right? Now, what makes something a core power exercise? Well, it's, yes, it's on the list, but again, we don't really like memorization. So we are looking at core exercises that involve a full range of motion, concentric and eccentric movement of the spine. So like literally the exact same definition as strength, but there's a little bit extra tacked on at the end here, at functionally applicable speeds, which is NASM's big fancy way of saying fast, right? So we are going to move the spine fast. So now if you look at how we've progressed things, we went from not moving the spine to fully moving the spine, to fully moving the spine quickly, right? We're doing explosive movements. So she's doing an overhead soccer throw, right? And that's very similar to a crunch, but she's exploding to be able to throw that ball, right? So this is going to help develop neuromuscular efficiency a little bit further in a very, very different way, right? Now this is all about like training the sort of speed of that neuromuscular efficiency, rate of force production, so developing power of our core movements, right? And yeah, there is still a little bit of stabilization here. There is a little bit of force production here. But the idea here is that you are moving as fast as possible. Really good examples of this are, like we see here, the medicine ball soccer throw, the Russian twist with a throw. This is always kind of a fun one. I freaking love this exercise. That is a terrific core exercise. I personally like to use the small rubber ones, and then he's using a padded wall here. I like a brick wall with a rubber ball because then, like, you notice like one thing about this, see how he has to kind of catch it and then he has to kind of drag it, he has to catch it and then drag it across his body. I love it when the ball's got enough force that I have to kind of catch it on the way and then like stop its force and then recruit the other way. I want to make sure that I'm being explosive in both directions. He's doing a really good job of being like pretty explosive concentrically as he's throwing it, but the eccentric explosive part is fairly limited. I also don't know that I love the reset where he's pausing and setting the ball down, but that's being, we're being real nitpicky there if we start getting into stuff like that. So that is actually, I think I've seen this video before. I think this is a really good demo. Speaking of explosive stuff, get out of here. All right, so there's your classic Russian. And no, never mind. That is definitely not the video I was thinking of. Anyway, so yeah, explosive, Russian twist with a throw or reverse overhead soccer throw, where you're actually going backwards. That's explosive for, the backside of our core. Again, it's not just all about the abs on the front side, right? So that is, those are all exercises that are moving the spine in different ways, right? We either don't move the spine with core stabilization, we do move it with strength, or we move it explosively with power. So in general, you're going to want to do 2 to 3 days a week with your core training. You want it to precede your resistance training for the most part, because it is a great thing to get nice and active before you go do your resistance stuff, because then you're just getting extra core work throughout the rest of your workout. Your body is stabilizing your core and everything before it goes in. This morning was friggin', heavy leg day for me. And I always make sure that I do my core work beforehand because I don't want my spine to move, during like my strength stuff. So I'll actually say I actually kind of do something a little bit different than the NASM protocols. I actually do core stabilization movements whenever I'm powerlifting, because I am trying to focus on stabilizing my spine before I go to like lift those big heavy weights. If I trained my spine to really move around a lot, it kind of sets me up for sort of bad habits that I have, which is, I tend to be kind of a butt tucker when I squat, and I tend to be kind of a low back rounder when I deadlift. And so I have to avoid both those things by doing a little bit of stability work beforehand. But at the same time, like that's not going to be great for developing like abdominal, an abdominal shelf, right? So that's where core strength movements come in. So at the end of my workout, once I'm done with all those like things, that is where I get into, the full range of motion movement stuff. All right, any questions on core stuff before we move into balance? Nothing? Feeling confident. All right, let's take a look at the balance stuff here. Back over here. So balance training, right? So your balance by definition, if you ever have this question as if you ever get this as a test question, your balance is how far outside of your base of support you can maintain equilibrium. So you think about like how far outside of like your base of support, which is probably like whatever foot it is that you're standing on, that's your balance. The further you can move away from that, right? So this is not very, if I'm standing on one leg, this is not very much balance. This is more, this requires more. I'm further away from my base of support, right? That's what we are seeing there in terms of our balance and stuff, right? So it's how far outside of things. Balance is really great because it not only helps you develop neuromuscular efficiency better than any other type of training, but it also helps you develop your proprioception, which is, again, your body awareness, right? Your body's ability to understand where it is in space. The more information you can give your brain and your body, the more the more times you can kind of connect those two and get them to like understand, different like amounts of forces and things like that, the more your brain and your body are going to be able to kind of speak the language of movement, right? That is proprioception. Again, it's your body's understanding of where it is in space. So when we are doing stable, balance training, we are putting our clients through exercises that are going to stress their limit of stability, right? One of the ways that we do that is by putting them into what we call a proprioceptively enriched environment. Okay. And what that is, it's kind of a big fancy sounding term. But basically what a proprioceptively enriched environment is it's an environment where the client is unstable, but still controlled. Like they're not doing anything that's like actually dangerous, where they're going to hurt anything. So basically what a proprioceptively enriched environment is it is a wobbly environment. So there is a specific progression on how we want to move our clients through their balance training, okay? And that progression is going to start on just the floor. So there really isn't any wobbly environment here, right? They might just be standing on one leg on the floor. It's very stable, right? And then we're going to put them on like a balance beam, right? And a balance beam is literally a piece of equipment like this. It doesn't have to be like the freaking gymnast ones that are like super, super high or anything. It can literally just be a 2x4 that's elevated off the ground a little bit. That's a perfect balance beam right there. There's nothing wrong with that. And what that does is that limits the surface area that your client has to be able to stay connected to the ground. And so by limiting that surface area, and then also by like changing the visual part of it, like your brain's trying to kind of line itself up with the ground and stuff, it starts to realize like, oh, I can't, this isn't exactly the same. That is going to throw off their balance a little bit. So they're going to have to recruit their muscles a little bit differently. And so you are developing their proprioception, right? You're giving their body and their brain more information so that it starts to, again, learn even better where it is in space, right? Where it is in the world. So we're going to start on the floor, and then we're going to move to a balance beam. Then we're going to move to a half foam roller. Okay, and a half foam roller is literally like it sounds. It's a foam roller that's been chopped in half, right? I really recommend getting one of these. What is this? It should be about like $6. $13. Good Lord. All right, well, maybe do a little more digging and find like a $6 one, because that's really about how much they should cost. But there's your half foam roller. What's really great about this, you can see here, she's doing like, she's got both feet on it, right? That's a very unstable environment. If you're standing on one leg, that would be an unstable way to do it, right? Both these are doing it like on the sort of rounded side. But you could also do it like this, right? See how this girl, she's got it on like the top side, right? Both of those are going to limit your surface area. And so there's two ways you can kind of use a half foam roller to train your clients. And it's a really, really great thing. Look at this. There's a plank where she's got a full foam roller and then a half foam roller here. She's planking. She's probably doing push-ups actually. That's awesome. That's a really great, like, this is more of a, if it's a push-up, then that's a chest exercise, but that would be a really good, like, stabilization level chest exercise. If we're trying to train our balance, we're really just going to try to get better at sort of standing, and holding and stabilizing in one particular position, right? So you can kind of see a really good example of that there, right? Or standing on, actually standing on one leg, like in this version here. And again, you can do this in the frontal plane, or you could do it in the sagittal plane, right? You can do it in either direction. So that's the half foam roller. Then we are going to progress to the Airex or foam pad. I really recommend you guys buy one of these. I think every trainer should own one of these. They're, $20 or so. And it's literally just like a big squishy pad. It is super helpful. Not only is it great for balance training, obviously, or you can put your client and have them do like planks and stuff like that on it. But also it's a really great place to have your client kneel when they're doing things like, kneeling hip flexor exercises, or if they're doing like, if you got a senior that you're training with like a bird dog or something, that's a huge Airex pad. You don't need one that big, but you just need it for their knees. But everybody should own one of these. I really do recommend buying one of these guys. I tried to push for a long time actually to get them in your Sochi bags, but they were so big and bulky that I lost that fight. But these are a super worthwhile investment. You can see here, there he is doing a little bit of core work, but it's on a squishy pad. So now it's getting a little bit of stabilization in there, right? Love the Airex pad. And that's a progression from the half foam roller. And then lastly, we're going to have the Dynadisc, or the balance disc, right? And the Dynadisc is this sort of like inflatable disc shaped thing. And this is like really wobbly and really unstable. So it's going to train, your balance like crazy, because there's a lot of movement that's going to happen, underneath the foot there, right? That's a really big Dynadisc. Usually they're a little thinner and flatter than that. But that is sort of what we're seeing there. That's a really great thing. So let's say you've got a client that you're progressing, on like a chest press or something. What do? You make it heavier, right? It's like they get better at it, you make it a little heavier, they get better at it, you make it a little heavier, right? Well, when it comes to balance training, how do we make things harder? Well, you start them on the floor, then you put them on a balance beam, they get good at it, then you put them on a half foam roller, they get good at it, you put them on an Airex pad, and then eventually you put them on a Dynadisc. And the reason that this progression goes in this order is you'll notice like both of these are not even like adding instability necessarily. These are both stable environments. But then you introduce the half foam roller, which can move through one plane of motion, either this way or this way, right? But it can only move through one plane of motion. It's either going to move frontal plane or it's going to move sagittal plane. It doesn't do any sort of like spinning, right? But then we put them on the Airex pad where, maybe they can tilt a little bit this way. They can put too much weight in the front or in the back. Right now they can move through two planes of motion at the same time. And then with the Dynadisc, they can move through all three planes of motion, And so that's why this progression goes in this order. It goes from 1 plane of motion to 2 planes of motion to 3 planes of motion. And that is a progression you guys will probably want to have memorized. I can't guarantee you that they'll ask you a question and say, like, what is the appropriate progression for these, but they theoretically could. So I definitely recommend getting that progression memorized. Just remember 1, 2, 3, right? Moves 1 plane of motion, 2 planes of motion, 3 planes of motion. Well, I guess 0, 1, 2, 3, right? No planes of motion here. Any questions on that? Actually, just while just in case that one's confusing.
No questions, pretty clear.
Okay, cool. All right. Sue, what about like progressing, our exercise selection? Well, just like the core, it's literally the same concept here. Hopefully you guys are seeing a pretty strong pattern, but we have a progression of moving from the stabilization level into the strength level into the power level. And we are going to continue moving through this progression as well with all of those, right? So even if I'm doing a core stable, or a balanced stabilization exercise, well, throughout the month, I'd move through this progression here. If I had a client doing balanced strength, same thing is true. If I had a client moving through balanced stability, their power, that is also true, right? We're going to use these pieces of equipment here, but looking at the stabilization level, right? The idea behind the stabilization level is that you are going to choose balanced stabilization exercise. So I'm going to kind of drag this chart here. We're going to be in this section right here. So with clients in stabilization, you are choosing balanced stabilization exercises. What the heck is a balanced stabilization exercise? Well, it's a balance exercise that involves little to no movement of your balance leg. So you are not moving your balance leg. If you are, as long as you're like stabilizing and holding, that's a balance stabilization exercise, right? So it's very similar to the core, right? We went from little to no movement of the spine now to little to no movement of the balance leg, right? Very controlled, very, very much stabilization exercises. So a really good, the idea here is that it's improving your joint stabilization and neuromuscular efficiency. The exercises that we're going to see are things like the single leg lift and chop. This is a classic example that does involve movement, but it does not involve movement of the balanced leg. See how he's doing this here, right? He's going to stand on one leg, right? He's got his foot up off the ground, and he's just moving that through a full range of motion. This leg here, his left leg, is not moving. That's why it's the balanced leg, right? He's moving other stuff, but not that. Another good example that we've got is the single leg balance with reach. That's another classic stabilization level balance exercise. You can see this is a slightly modified version that he's going to do here that I actually really, really like, where I think he just has her do the scoop, if I'm not mistaken. Come on, Brent. Let's actually see. Okay, well, anyway, so I guess she is actually just doing the sort of traditional reach. So she's gonna reach forward in the sagittal plane. She's not moving this balance leg, right? It stays in one spot. She reaches that leg out, and then that can be in all planes of motion. She could go sagittal, she could go frontal, she could scoop behind her and go transverse. The way I like to do single leg balance reach, honestly, is to go sagittal and then scoop around to the back, kind of like I'm opening a gate. I kind of like that version instead, personally. But that's the single leg balance with reach. We've also got the single leg shoulder press. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, single leg shoulder press, isn't that just like a shoulder exercise? Yeah, it is. But if you want to use it as a balance exercise for a client in stabilization, because maybe you don't have anywhere else to put it, well, this could either be a stabilization level shoulder exercise in the resistance section, or yeah, you could use it as your balance, because is it moving your balance leg? No, it's not. Therefore, it is a balance stabilization exercise. And that's where sometimes you will see exercises fall in multiple categories. Now, if your client is in the strength level, This is going to be where, phases 2, 3, and 4, you're going to choose balance strength exercises. Now, what's the difference between balance stabilization and balance strength? Well, balance stabilization involves little to no movement of the balance leg. Balance strength involves full movement of the balance leg. So these are exercises that involve a full dynamic, concentric, and eccentric range of movement of the balance leg, right? So balance exercises that move you through a full range of motion, okay? So good examples of this are things like the lunge to balance, right? The lunge to balance exercise where, she's going to move, her balance leg is her left leg, right? So she moves it and then she has to stabilize it, right? So she lunges. She's obviously lunging with her other leg, but like this leg is also now moving through a full range of motion. So is this a leg exercise or is this a balance exercise? It's a little bit of both, right? She's getting a little bit of strength on this leg, but she's developing that dynamic full range of motion balance on her stance leg. We've got the single leg Romanian deadlift, one of my favorite exercises in general. Where, that's not what I want to watch. Looking for a short video here. We can see this version here, right? Where, she is now moving her balance leg through a full range of motion. She's moving at the hip, right? And then we've got the single leg squat with touchdown, another one of my all-time favorite exercises, which is this movement right here. You see he's going to squat, right? His balance leg, which is his left here, is now moving the ankle, the knee, and the hip. Meanwhile, his spine has to kind of stabilize. I will say one pro tip here, guys. If you look at the position of this, I know that this is called the single leg squat touchdown, but with the way that the body drops down, this is totally closer to a deadlift. So this is actually one of my favorite warm-ups pre-deadlift for a lot of my clients. Even though it's called a squat, I think you look at the mechanics of it, it's much more closely related to the deadlift. Lastly, if our client is in the power level, right? So now they've moved up the OPT model, they're up here in power. Well, we're going to choose balance exercises that involve a full range of motion of the balanced leg, but at functionally applicable speeds. So these are our explosive movements. So again, no movement of the balanced leg, full movement of the balanced leg, full movement of the balanced leg, fast, right? That functionally applicable speeds coming back again. So these are things where you are learning how to go through rapid eccentric deceleration. You're learning how to decelerate and then stabilize, right? So exercises that require rapid eccentric deceleration and stabilization of the balance leg. So you can see here, if he did hopscotch, he's jumping and then he has to hold the position. So if he does a hopscotch with a hold in the middle, that's a really great example of a balance power exercise, right? Hopscotch to balance, you have to hold your position, right? Or you'll see an icky shuffle to balance, right? You'll sometimes see like that really fast icky shuffle where people are like boom, 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 boom. Or you'll sometimes like that version there, right? Or sometimes you'll see, can we get a freaking slow version, please? Come on, internet, help me out. I still not really holding, but imagine if he held like each landing sort of 3 to 5 seconds. I'm not gonna spend all day trying to find what I need, but single leg hop with stabilization, that's another really good one. Literally hopping into position and then stabilizing, right? So he's going to stabilize, jump, and then stabilize again. That's that rapid eccentric deceleration. Great freaking exercise for developing your balance in the power level. We can also do an ice skater to stabilization. That's another really good one, where she's going to jump and then she's holding. I would hold that landing probably just a little bit longer, but it's not bad, right? So she does just little pauses in there. So that is how we are going to sort of write things. So now if we've got, a client and we're moving them through 3 months of training, right? Well, we would start with like little to no movement first, and then we would start introducing movement in the middle, and then we would introduce fast movement at the end. And that's how we're going to progress our clients. So again, 2 to 3 days per week. Always make sure your biggest and first priority should always be to make sure that your exercises are safe, that they are progressive, meaning that like they built on whatever it was that you established in the beginning. And that, yeah, if you're trying to train for balance, it needs to be proprioceptively challenging. That is where we are seeing sort of our core stabilization. I feel like these are all slides that were supposed to be earlier. I actually don't have a summary slide here. But yeah, there's no necessary sort of summarizing everything up, succinctly. It's just like, stabilization level clients, they get the stabilization stuff. That's all about resisting movement. Strength is all about moving through full movement, and power is all about moving through full movement explosively. And that is balance. Any questions on balance stuff, guys? Questions, comments?
So pretty clear.
Cool. All right. We got one more PowerPoint. We're going to work our we're going to work our way through reactive training next, and then we're also going to look at SAQ. The youth manual sort of like lumps SAQ and reactive together, which is sort of a new approach that NASM's taking in general in their new textbook as well. But as we're looking at the plyometric stuff, right, the explosive stuff, when I say something is a reactive exercise, oftentimes you will hear this referred to as plyometrics. They both kind of mean the same thing. I personally like the term plyometric better. Mo really likes the term, I like the term reactive better. Mo actually prefers the term plyometric. NASM will use them completely interchangeably. You'll see them in both directions. But today, I'll try to use the term plyometrics a little bit more, just because I tend to naturally say reactive a little bit more often. So plyometric or reactive training, what it is explosive movements that focus on rate of force production and reactivity to ground reaction forces. So if you think about picture running in super slow motion, the second your toe makes contact with the ground, that's when your nervous system knows to recruit the muscles in your foot, the muscles in your calves and shins, hamstrings and quads, glutes and core, right? That's, once it touches, it's like when you're walking down some stairs, and maybe the light's off, right? You don't have, you're trying to go down some stairs, but you can't see anything. You kind of reach with your foot, and the second you feel it touch, that's when you sort of commit and put your weight on it, right? Or if you've ever been walking and you've stepped into a hole or something, right? You have no idea. You weren't expecting to step off a curb, or you weren't expecting to step off a hole. So your body has to react as fast as it can to recruit everything. And then once it touches the ground, it has to respond to that as well. This is why I actually really like the term reactive, because it is all about how fast your nervous system can react to something. But at the same time, it is very explosive, which is what plyo means. So that is our plyometric training. And then we're also going to be looking at our speed, agility, and quickness training today, or SAQ. Training to develop speed, which is your ability to travel in one direction as fast as possible. Your agility, which is your ability to change direction as fast as possible. And quickness, which is your ability to change body position as fast as possible. So, getting your hands up to be able to catch something. So obviously, our objectives today are to kind of be able to break these things down and understand what they are, how to design them, and implement them into a fun, safe program. So plyometric training, or reactive exercises are rapid eccentric, decelerations followed by rapid concentric contractions, right? Remember, eccentric is your length. Ooh, somebody broke something. Eccentric is the lengthening of a muscle, right? And then concentric is the shortening of a muscle. So when it comes to being explosive, you need to lengthen first to load the body up so you can shorten afterwards and be explosive. Think about like pulling back like a slingshot, right? You're lengthening out the rubber band in that slingshot, and then you're letting it go so that it can rapidly shorten and accelerate in the opposite direction, right? So that is what's known as a stretch shortening cycle. Okay, it is a rapid eccentric contraction followed by a rapid concentric rebounding contraction, right? So when you explosively lengthen a muscle, your nervous system is kind of designed to protect that muscle that you just rapidly stretched, right? Like you stretched it really, really fast. And so then your nervous system goes, whoa, we need to pull that back the other way, right? And so then it decides to sort of rapidly, contract it the other way. That is what we're kind of seeing there to sort of act as like a protective mechanism, and so that is what we see in sort of a stretch shortening cycle. We can take advantage of that because that actually makes us a little bit more explosive. So we take advantage of that protective cycle there. So if your muscles are sort of acting as springs, the eccentric contraction is the loading and the concentric contraction is the unloading or the energy release, right? So we definitely want to expose youths to plyometric training early on because like as a youth, you have like a really adaptable nervous system. So if you're trying to make someone who's very explosive, making sure that they're exposed to things like sports where they have to be explosive or, exercises that make them more explosive, exposing them to those things like early on is actually very, very helpful for developing their ability to be better at hopping, sprinting, throwing, whatever it happens to be. This is where it does kind of carry over into adulthood very, very, very well, which is why we like kids to play sports. Not only that, but it's also going to help strengthen their bones, their connective tissue. And then, if their brain knows how to move things explosively, it's going to reduce their risk of injury as well. So whenever you're doing plyometric training or reactive training, you want to make an SAQ as well. You always want to ask yourself these three things. These are your first priorities. First, is it safe? Second, is it progressive? Did I already set them up with a foundation before I progress them to something that's very advanced? And then ask if it's fun. If it's explosive, it probably is. People love jumping, people love, being a little bouncy. So that is where we have our three levels, just like we did with core and just like we did with balance. So we have plyometric stabilization exercises for stabilization clients, plyometric strength for strength level clients, and plyometric power for power level clients. So if we look at the OPT model here, I got to kind of zoom out for this one, but if we look at reactive training, right? Actually, what I can do, hold on. Let's just open this up and just go like this. All right, there's our reactive stuff, right? So we've got a client who is in the stabilization level. They are going to get stabilization style plyometric exercises or plyometric stabilization exercises. Now, how do you spot that blue jay in the wild, right? How do you spot that plyometric stabilization exercise out there in the wild? Well, these are reactive exercises. These are plyometrics that involve little to no movement upon landing. So really what you're focused on here is not developing somebody's ability to jump super high. Instead, you are developing their ability to land properly, right? So plyometric stabilization exercises are exercises that focus on your landing mechanics, and they involve little to no movement upon that landing. You are learning how to land and hold your position, right? I'm sure you guys have had this. If you've ever jumped it was probably when you were a kid or, maybe as an adult, if you've ever tried to like jump from like a specific like height that was maybe a little too high. And then like when you hit the ground, you just crumpled like a sack of potatoes, right? That is that is, we struggle with our landing. We didn't have like the core strength or anything, to kind of hold that position properly. So we kind of just crumpled to the ground, right? So good examples of this are going to be things like a box jump to stabilization, right? Box jump to stabilization is all about, just like any other box jump, except that you're just going to hold the landing once you get up there. She does not hold her landing very long, by the way, which drives me a little crazy, but especially because this is put out by NASM. But you can do a 3 to 5 second hold once you land, right? And then we've also got the squat jump to stabilization. We could do the exact same thing right here, right? Just jump straight up. 1, 2. Right? So she's holding her landings. Or maybe a tuck jump to stabilization. It's a really freaking tough exercise. So she's going to drive her knees into her chest and then land. So this is all about she's establishing really good landing mechanics, and she's doing a good job. Like her knees are for the most part a little bit of cave in, but for the most part, she's got a really good alignment there. Toes aren't pointing too far outward. She's got a good setup there. So if we had a client who maybe has bad squatting habits, that squat jump to stabilization actually might improve them because it's giving them increased exposure to learn how to land and hold that, toe position and knee position properly. Now, if you got a client in the strength level, that's going to be phase 2 or 3 or 4, well, then we're going to give them plyometric strength exercises. Now, how do you spot one of those in the wild? Well, these are plyometric exercises that involve a full range of motion at a repetitive tempo, right? So these are plyometrics that involve dynamic, concentric, and eccentric ranges of motion, and they're sort of a repetitive tempo. So now you're learning how to transfer between lengthening and shortening, right? You are learning how to transfer between the stretch and the shortening in that stretch shortening cycle, right? So he's going to jump, and he's going to jump, and he's going to jump. Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to play this in slow motion. I don't want to be, I feel like I've been very judgmental of every video I watched today, but I do want to show you guys something. Look at these guys' knee stabilization. See all that wobbling that's happening there? Whoop, whoop, whoop. It kind of goes in all these different directions. This is absolutely a perfect example of the type of client that I would have do squat jumps to stabilization so that I can establish and get rid of that knee wobble before I would make them do repeating squat jumps. And that is where, maybe my client, I need to start this guy in stabilization before I give him this version, but if my client has no knee wobble because I taught them how to hold that position properly in the stabilization level, I've done my job. And now I know that he's going to be nice and safe. We could do repeat tuck jumps, which would look like this. Boop. And then she goes into the next one, into the next one, into the next one, right? Same exercises, right? But just slightly different versions. Or repeat butt kicks. Actually, those are all butt kickers. This is a friggin' tough exercise, by the way. There it is. Right, so he's doing that version there. That guy's got a freaking great rhythm. That's one explosive dude. So that is another really, really great one, right? And that repeated tempo is totally appropriate for any client who's in strength. So again, we're starting to see, again, no movement to, let's get that repetitive range of motion, full movement, right? And then what do you think we're going to see in power? We're going to see reactive exercises that move through that same range of motion that we did in strength, but now we are trying to move as fast as possible. So clients in the power level, phase 5, plyometric power strength, right? Plyometric power exercises are exercises that involve a full dynamic range of motion, concentric and eccentric, as fast as possible. So this is where it gets really, really explosive. And so we're looking at like proprioceptive jumps, for instance. Actually, these are always hard to find, like demos of. There we go. Oop. So see how he's not taking any pauses, right? He's jumping from one right into the next. No pausing at all. One rep into the next rep, into the next rep. He's trying to move as fast as possible, right? That's all about plyometric power. Or maybe like ice skaters that are actually performed at speed. I actually had a really hard time finding, really hard time finding this last time. A lot of people are doing ice skaters like slow, and it drives me crazy. I mean, that's an ice skater to stabilization. That's not an ice skater. That's a little better, right? A little bit faster. But it's as fast as possible. That's what we're going for. Or, you know, one of my favorite classic examples is just high knees. There's a great, you know, plyometric power exercise. Oh my gosh. Okay. She like paused immediately. But yeah, going immediately from one end to the next. She's not really putting like, it doesn't look like super max effort into it, but like, bah, 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 bah. That would be exactly what we're kind of going for there, right? Just really fast, really explosive. A lot of control there, which is still good. I mean, obviously you want to make sure you do it with control, whatever, but that is plyometric power, right? So that is how we are going to apply that, you know, rate of force production, right? So he's going to jump, you know, box to box to box to box to box to box as fast as possible, like a proprioceptive square pattern or a proprioceptive jump. So here's the thing, guys. Don't forget, when it comes to doing your reactives training, your clients need to have proper core strength before you should ever make them do any of this. They need to have proper stabilization. We can look at that guy who was doing the squat jumps with the knees that were wobbling. That doesn't show me that he has very good stabilization. So I probably wouldn't do that type of squat jump with him, even if I did move him into strength. I'd probably regress that movement because I always want to make sure that I'm being progressive about this, right? And then you want to make sure that your client can move their joints through their full range of motion. They don't have the flexibility to move through a full range of motion. Making them try to jump through that range of motion is only going to cause harm. So that's definitely not something we are looking at. So next thing we've got our speed, agility, and quickness training. This works a little bit differently. There's no such thing as like a stabilization level speed exercise or a power level agility exercise. It doesn't really work that way. Instead, these are all just general exercises that are focused on teaching your clients how to accelerate, teaching them how to decelerate, and how to stabilize as they are sort of running through different ranges of motion. And this is great because like the more you can expose someone to this kind of stuff, the more likely they are to avoid injury as they are sort of moving through life. You know, I love giving my super like senior clients who have like, you know, poor posture, poor balance and stuff. I will absolutely put them through, you know, very modified, but versions of SAQ training. You know, I've put 80-year-old clients through speed ladders. Yes, it looks very different than, you know, an NFL athlete going through a speed ladder, you know, where they're like, blah, 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 you know, but learning how to have that like little bit of footwork is very helpful for even our senior level clients. And what's also really great about SAQ training when it comes to youths, though, is that it is super, super, super fun. So it will absolutely improve your client participation. This is why we're going to take a little field trip on Friday. Instead of meeting up in the gym, instead of meeting up at Sochi, this is why we're actually going to meet out in public on Friday, and we're going to go through a little bit of a speed ladder, sort of athletic participation kind of thing. So super, super fun. And we do have to have our definitions of speed and our definitions of agility and definitions of quickness. very clear before we sort of move through things, right? So speed, by definition, what speed is it is how quickly one can travel in one direction as fast as possible. So your speed is how fast you can move from point A to point B, right? Now, you'll also sometimes hear like the term linear speed. Linear speed is how fast you can travel in one direction. There can be a little bit of a curve to speed, but for the most part, it's usually very, very straight, okay? And speed is going to be made up of two things. It is going to consist of, sorry, one second. It's going to consist of your stride rate, so how fast you're able to turn your feet over, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and your stride length, which is how much distance you are covering per step. So left, then right, then left, how much distance you're covering. So that's going to be your determine your speed. If you can increase both of those, if you can cover more ground while turning the feet over fast, you're going to have a greater amount of speed. Now, if you do too much to the stride length, if you start making the legs way too long, well, that's going to slow your rate down, which means you actually might lose speed. Likewise, if you travel really fast and you're turning like, but you're not covering any ground, that's also going to reduce your speed. So there is sort of an optimal stride rate and an optimal stride length that you eventually are developing with your clients over time. And that's helping your clients get faster and faster and faster. So doing drills that work on both of those things are going to improve your speed. Now, agility, by definition, is your ability to accelerate or decelerate or change directions as fast as possible. So like if you are sprinting and then you make a super sharp right-hand turn, that turn, you have to decelerate and then accelerate in a different direction. That's your agility, right? So you can think of this as multi-directional speed, right? Speed is very linear. Agility is very not, right? A lot of horizontal inertia there. And then quickness is your ability to react to some type of external stimulus as fast as possible and like react with probably your entire body. So the classic example of this is catching something, like reacting to or maybe like it's a verbal cue, Did anybody watch last night's Ravens game? Did anybody watch that last night?
No.
Oh man, last night the Raiders beat the Ravens in overtime and it was crazy. And it was like the Raiders were driving for this final touchdown. And it was just like, how did he get, he got this guy was so open. And I was like, how did he get so open? And then they showed the highlight. Let's see if we can find it here. Look at that. Look at how wide open he is at the very end. I mean, he's literally like just jogging. And we were like, look at that. Look at how much separation there is. And we were like, how did it happen? And I'm not gonna be able to find the repeat of that. That would take me forever to look that up. But basically what happened is like that guy ran straight through the enemy team, and his defender, who was supposed to be on him, he was backing up and he bumped into his own guy back here and then had to like respond and then like run after him. And so he kind of got tripped up on his own guy. He was not able to react fast enough to this kind of unexpected run that this, offensive Raider guy had. He didn't have the time to like react to it. And so like quickness is the thing that like really would have made the difference there. And it was wild highlight. It was crazy to see. But that game was absolutely nuts. Really cool way to end the first week of football coming back. But quickness is your ability to react to some type of external stimulus, the gun going off during like a race, like the starting line, or, watching someone's hips while you're playing, or, if something's on its way to you and learning how to catch it. This is one of the reasons why I love playing Frisbee so much. there are so many times where like, it'll take a Frisbee will be traveling, it'll take an air bounce at the very end and you're like, crap, you got to like respond to it really quickly. I love that. But that is what our quickness training is. That's our speed, that's our agility, that's our quickness. So we can train for these things using like lots of games, using cones and speed ladders, really fun stuff that's out there. So speed ladder drills are really great because they're really good at helping us develop effective footwork. So if you have like a speed ladder and you went left, right in one box each time, we call that a 1-in. Super great exercise for working on your stride rate, right? Or 2-ins, right? Oh my God, that's another one that's really good for working on stride rate. Thanks, appreciate it. So those are both like very good speed drills, right? Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Agility drills are things where your client is maybe working on directional changes. So sprinting from this cone to that cone, changing direction, and just going in a box as fast as possible. That's a really good one. And usually we'll do like a box drill. It's usually like we want to work on different types of athleticism as well through different like planes of motion. So we'll have them do a sprint, which is very sagittal. We'll have them stay facing that same way and do a side shuffle, which is very frontal. They'll do a back pedal, which is sagittal, and then do a karaoke, which is a little transverse, right? And then we would have them do the exact same thing facing the other way, in order to keep our client nice and even. So they would start here and sprint, side shuffle, back pedal, karaoke. And that's a really good agility drill because it's all about directional change. And then when it comes to like playing games, those are really, really good for quickness drills, right? So like follow the snake, for instance, right? They don't know what one person's going to do. So, one person's over here and they're maybe like the leader, right? Meanwhile, this other person's over here and they're like a follower and they have to do whatever this person did. It's kind of like playing a game of horse in a way, One person does something and the other person has to respond to it and move the same way, right? So that's a really good one. Or if you've even seen like a partner mirror drill, if you've ever seen like a mirror drill where like, what's going to happen is like one person's trying to break away and the other person's trying to follow as effectively as possible, right? So like he's trying to get away from him and he's trying to keep him from going in whatever direction it happens to be, right? He doesn't want him to get past him. And he doesn't know what the other guy's going to do. He has no idea what's going to happen with that other person. And so like, that's the mirror, right? Like these guys are, kind of juking around. You'll notice like the people who are on the following side, following is over here, leaders are over here. You'll notice they're just keeping their eyes on their hips because if they see their hips turn over, that's how they know they're going to change direction. So that's very much like a quickness drill. Now, like I said, there's no such thing as like agility strength or agility power or agility stabilization or quickness speed, or quickness stabilization. There's nothing like that. Instead, the way this exercise selection is going to work is with clients who are in the stabilization level, you are primarily going to focus. Good Lord, I can't drag this around like I normally can. With clients who are in the stabilization level, you are primarily going to focus on drills that focus on limited horizontal inertia and limited unpredictability, which is a big fancy way of saying speed drills. So clients who are in stabilization, limited horizontal inertia, so you're limiting your agility, and limited unpredictability. Unpredictability is all about quickness. So primarily with clients in the stabilization level, you're focusing on speed drills, okay? So you're doing a lot of speed ladder stuff, maybe a lot of sprinting, and a lot of just like classic track drills, high knees, butt kickers, things like that. Side shuffling, karaoke, whatever, Maybe you throw a little bit of directional change in there if you want to, but for the most part, you're really just focusing on just traveling in one intended direction, right? Now, if your client's in the strength level, well, now we're going to use speed and agility drills. You can sort of start to throw like a blend in there, right? And this is similar to cardio, right? We think about like how cardio worked. We had stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Stage 1 involved zone 1. Stage 2 involves zone 2 and zone 1. And stage 3 involves zones 3, 2, and 1. Same thing is true of our speed, agility, quickness stuff, right? If our client's in the strength level, we're going to do some speed drills and we're going to throw some agility in there, but we're still not doing quickness, right? These are drills that allow greater horizontal inertia. So we're getting agility in, but we're still limiting the unpredictability. We want our clients to know exactly what's going on. So a left drill, right? A left drill, which is where someone does a sprint, back pedal, side shuffle, and then another side shuffle, and then a karaoke. So he's getting some speed in here, right? He's traveling in one direction, but he's changing direction as well, right? This is the agility part of it. And then one final sprint at the end is what he should have done. So that is your classic sort of left drill. We've also got box drills, right? Like I showed you in this version here, right? That's a classic agility drill. Or a 5-10-5 drill, which in my opinion is sort of the king of agility drills. Actually, I remember that video. That video sucks. A 5-10-5 drill is where you basically sprint 5 yards, turn around, sprint 10 yards back. So he's going to start in the middle. He's going to go 5 yards to his left, 10 yards all the way down to the other side. And then the drill ends when he gets back to the middle. So that is all about like super short directional change. Boom, boom, and boom, right? 5 yards, 10 yards, and then 5 more yards. So that's your classic agility drill. And lastly, we've got power drills, right? These are, when it comes to the power level, you're going to have exercises that allow for maximum horizontal inertia, so maximum agility, and maximal unpredictability. So these are drills that are focusing on quickness, agility, and yeah, they're still incorporating speed. So a modified box drill, which I actually can never find a video of, is where like you actually set up 2 box drills with a cone in the middle, and then you have one person leading and the other person following, and they don't know where they're going to go. This person runs to here, then this person runs to here, right? And then they go back to the center. This person goes here, this person goes here. So they're kind of following along with whatever the other person is doing, trying to keep up. So it's an agility drill that they don't know the parameters on, right? They don't know where they're going to end up. Or red light, green light is a classic game that kids love that is a really good quickness drill, right? They have to respond to where you say green light, red light, you know, like they have no idea. There's also the modified snake drill, right? Like the one that we saw here. They don't know what's going to happen. They're trying to follow the leader, right? So quickness drills, or even if you just look at the even the NFL combine, like that catching drill where they might have to like run and have to catch, like, look at that. That was a bad throw, right? And he had to kind of respond to it, you know, whoop, way too high. And he had to like get up and catch it, right? That's great for freaking quickness. You know, if I saw somebody take a crappy throw like that and still come down with the ball, I'm going to be impressed, right? That's good quickness. That's somebody I want on my team. So that is something we are trying to develop sometimes, you know, throw them a little curveball. So when it comes to clients, you know, who are in the stabilization level, for the most part, you're going to pick speed drills. Clients who are in the strength level, speed and agility drills are both appropriate. And then clients in the power level, speed, agility, and quickness drills. So plyometric training, really, really good for helping develop our clients' explosivity. It is all about that rapid eccentric lengthening followed by that rapid concentric shortening. The earlier you can expose your youths to this, the more likely they are to, you know, carry those skills into adulthood. We also really like SAQ drills with our youth clients because it's really great for, you know, keeping them motivated. It's fun, it's engaging. You guys are going to experience that on Friday. And when it comes down to it, we are trying to accelerate and decelerate and stabilize. Big benefits here are decreasing our risk of athletic injury, and, you know, drills, cones, speed ladders, things like that. But always ask yourself, is it safe? Is it progressive? And then, yeah, is your client going to enjoy it? Is it fun? You know? Where's my All right, so I want to show you an example of the movement prep and SAQ versions for our client, Ethan. You know, we've been moving this guy through 3 months of training here, right? We started with his warm up and his cool down. Do not ever collapse that thing. We started with his warm up and we started with his cool, you know, and then moved him into his cool down. Well, now we're looking at the core balance reactive section. And you can see here, I built a very complicated movement prep. This is where if you decided to use your movement prep as like a full workout, maybe have like a core balance SAQ day, this would actually work for that, you know? But you can see we've got 3 core exercises here, 3 balance exercises, and 3 reactive exercises. That's a lot of work, you know? Generally, you'd probably pick one of each. Your program would probably look something more, all right, apparently this is read only mode. Whatever. You know, it probably looks something more like where if you deleted those things. So McGill sit-up, that's a core stabilization exercise. So we're gonna do 3 sets at a 4-2-1 tempo there. A bird dog, he's gonna hold the position, and then a side plank. These are all exercises that really don't move the spine, right? Single leg lift and chop, like we talked about earlier, that doesn't move the balance leg. Single leg balance with reach, that doesn't move the balance leg. And the single leg balance with reach transverse also doesn't move. And so we can see like the transverse versions here, right? She's going to just take that forward and side, and then she does the swing there, right? So if I had him do the transverse version as a separate exercise from his frontal version, yeah, those are both stabilization exercises. And then we've got that classic squat jump to stabilization like we talked about earlier. You know, hold that landing 3 to 5 seconds, right? And then box jump to stabilization, and then lateral jump to stabilization. That's another really good one, right? Jumping to the side and holding, right? That's also a really good stabilization level reactive exercise. Then we've got the speed ladder. We're doing some 1-ins here, 1 foot in each box. We've got 2-ins. That's 2 feet in each box. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, right? We have got the W, the sort of in, out version, where she's kind of making like a sort of a W there. And then just a classic 40-yard dash, like literally just making our client sprint 40 yards as fast as possible. Doesn't have to be, you know, sometimes it is like really darn simple, you know, literally sprint, accelerate, go 40 yards down and stop. It's a speed drill, you know? So that is where we develop Ethan's sort of first ability. You know, we're really working on that athleticism in the beginning. And then next month, we can start working the spine through a full range of motion. We can start moving the balance leg through a full range of motion. We can start repeating our jumps. And then we can start getting into a little bit of agility drills, but we're still going to incorporate plenty of speed there. So now it's things like a ball crunch, right? Moving the spine through a full range of motion, moving it, right? She's crunching her spine. Or a back extension, right? She's moving the spine, right? And then she extends eventually. There we go, right? And then we've got like the single leg Romanian deadlift, right? That classic like full range of motion of the balance leg. And then we've got things like squat jumps where it's just at a repeating tempo, right? Just like last month, we did squat jumps to stabilization last month. Now that I know that they know how to land, we're going to do a squat jump for a repetitive tempo instead, right? We're still going to incorporate the speed ladder, so we still get a little bit of speed drills in there, but then we're going to get things like the box drill, right? Sprint, side shuffle, back pedal, karaoke. So now a little bit of a speed, a little bit of agility. So now we've progressed Ethan from his first month of stabilization into, you know, working on that multi-directional speed. And then we got him into power level. Month 3, we're really going to go hard. We're going to get into things like the medicine ball rotation chest pass, which is going to be an explosive movement for the core. Right? So she's really exploding her core now. You know, rather than just like moving the core like kind of slowly through like a crunch or something, we're really starting to get explosive with it, right? Here's a medicine ball overhead throw. That's explosive for the low back, right? And you literally chuck it behind you like that. There's also the balance power exercises, which are really explosive, right? Like a single leg hop with stabilization, right? She has to be explosive and then balance afterwards, or a box hop down with stabilization. This is always really explosive, right? She's literally jumping from high to low and then holding the landing, right? Or maybe it's like, you know, the super reactive power stuff, right? Ice skaters that are really, really explosive. Boom, 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 as fast as possible. Or, you know, hurdle jumps that are really explosive, right? That's reactive and it's power. She's going as fast as possible. The faster you do one, the faster you can do the other one. And then we're going to start incorporating some quickness drills. So we have speed still. We got the speed ladder. We have the agility with like the left drill, but now we're going to do a modified box drill, right? This client has no idea which box he's going to go to, right? One person's going to tell him, you know, this one. And he goes back over to this one, and then that one, and then that one, right? He has no idea what order he's going to go in. That's why it's the modified box drill. Or a mirror box drill, where one person is sort of matching the other person, right? Like this guy's leading, this guy's reacting. You don't know, you know, like, so that's agility and quickness sort of together, right? And that's how you do it. That's how you kind of write your programs, depending on what level your client's in. Any questions today, guys? Thomas, Bay, how you guys feeling?
Feeling pretty good.
Yeah, kind of fun. All right, guys. We'll kill the recording here.